Jim, earlier when we talked about the ghosts of Roswell at the rehabilitation center there in New Mexico, what can you continue to do to follow up on something like that? Anything?
Well, as I said, I have plans to go out there here in another week or so, and I think what I'm going to do is find out if I can find anybody else who has any more information, if they can, more witnesses. But I think what really needs to be done is for someone with the proper credentials, the proper training, to, as the caller suggested, go out there with some very sophisticated equipment and just see what we can firmly establish about that particular subject.
When you have some time, email Lisa, my producer, and she'll send you a couple names of some people you might want to contact, Jim, who I think would be very interested in going out there with their sophisticated equipment to do exactly what you need to have done.
I think it would be most fascinating, don't you, George?
Yep, absolutely. We'll get you both back on, them with their EVP sounds and you with your stories on what you think happened out there. I still think it's fascinating. If they are alien ghosts running around in that place, I'd just like to hear what they sound like.
Right. Well, I think if that could be nailed down, I think the ramifications could be quite extraordinary.
Could be the first time in the history of the world that we would have actual sounds of aliens.
Right. And there's something I feel like I should make a point right here after having talked about the monatomic gold powder. There's already people out on the internet that are offering what they say is this gold powder and making all kinds of claims, and I simply want to for my own conscious sake, I want to make sure that your listeners understand that this is very experimental, very, very cutting-edge physics, and that if you're going to go and think you're going to cure some disease, or if you think you're going to live longer or feel better, you just better be very, very careful, because we all know what happens if you get lead in your system, and any type ingesting any type of metal can be very, very dangerous. So please, folks, be extremely cautious and wary about people who promise the moon.
I got a friend, Jim, who has so much iron in his blood system that once a month they have to take a pint of blood out of his system. They have to bleed it off him, and he's got to do that every month for the rest of his life.
Wow. Well, of course, and that's what you have to do if you get some sort of metal poisoning. During World War II, they found that defense workers were coming down with lead poisoning because of paint that they were using on ships and planes and tanks and things. And the thing they found, the only thing that would take care of that is essentially, well, they call it chelation therapy. And what you have to do is go through a series of blood transfusions, essentially, where are not transfusions, but they put
IV you
chemicals in your blood to clean your pipes.
Yeah, it's like a 4-hour process.
Yes, yes. It's so, you know, please, folks, be real careful. Don't just jump at whoever says, "Oh, I've got that." You know, George, I ran into that years ago when you mentioned at the very beginning of the show about my credentials, about the fact that I was onto the remote viewing story years before it became public. And I told some of the people who were with the military remote viewers at that time, I said, I can already see what's coming. I said, you know, today you see the signs in the cities that say, Madam Zodiac palm reading, you know. I said, as soon as this story gets to the public, you're going to see Madam Zodiac remote viewer.
Yeah, you got to be careful. To the phones we go. West of the Rockies, you're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Hi, George.
Yes, sir.
Listening to you on 580 KIDO out of Boise, Idaho.
Boise, Idaho. Welcome to the program.
Thanks. All the people at the Fantastic Forum say hi.
Super. Tell them hi for me.
Hey, Jim, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm here. I was wondering, do you think a lot of these aliens are beneath the earth, and that a lot of them are coming from, like, underground bases rather than, like, from space? Well, you're kind of asking two separate questions there. Are they from space or are they from underground? I think actually it's a little bit of the two, because in my research what I've found is, and some of the remote viewers have looked at this too, there seem to be underground bases and even underwater bases. There is several bodies of water in the world, particularly in South America, Central America, where UFOs are seen going in and out of the water quite frequently. And then, of course, you've got all these rumors and stories of underground bases. Let's face it, if they have the technology to travel to this planet and to skim around in our atmosphere and not get caught by our militaries, then, who knows? They may have the capability of hiding out in caverns. In fact, one of the best military remote viewers was Pat Price. And years ago, he came into work and said, I've located 4 alien bases on the Earth, and they were all under mountains. So, yeah, there may well be some bases under the Earth. Of course, I haven't been there, so I can't tell you for sure.
Well, you get there. Hey, Chris, thanks for your call.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Jim, what if the possibilities, as he brings up something very fascinating, what are the possibilities that they might be earthbound, that they were always here? Maybe they lived in the ocean, who knows, but that they were just a totally separate civilization. Always here.
Well, some years ago I probably would snicker at that suggestion, but I've come long enough and far enough that seen and heard and reported on enough strange things that I take that and put it in my file,
Yeah. Exactly.
Because, George, I'm sure you're well aware that there is just a wide variety of books and publications that go back into the last century. Well, that would be the 1900s. Let's say it goes back into the century before that, well into the 1800s, that talks about Agartha and these subterranean worlds and the idea that there could be an underground civilization. I'm not going to be the one to just poo-poo that out of hand and say that's impossible and it can't happen, but I'll have to say that in my research of that particular subject, the evidence for that is fragmentary, it's narrative. There does not seem to be a lot of hard evidence for that, but one never knows.
Let's go to our wild card line. Your turn. You're on with Jim Mars on Coast to Coast.
Hi, this is Doug.
Hi, Doug. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Ferndale, Michigan.
Hi there.
Okay, I've got a two-part question. First part, the substance I think you fellows are talking about is called tritium. Secondly, the Kennedy assassination. Last November, there was a documentary linking Lyndon Baines Johnson and a gentleman, I don't know if he's heard of him. His name is Estes.
Billy Saul. Billy Saul.
Yes.
The fertilizer king.
Yes, and another gentleman named Wallace were supposedly linked into getting that parade route changed.
Well, that has not, as far as changing the parade route, I don't believe that that's actually been nailed down. Nobody seems to understand exactly what happened on that motorcade route. For one thing, originally I think they were supposed to have blocked off Main Street and it was to come straight through Dealey Plaza and then turn up onto the freeway, but at the last minute they came down Main Street, made a 90-degree turn onto Houston, then a 120-degree turn onto Elm, which placed Kennedy right there on one side of the plaza, surrounded by bushes, hedges, landscape, knoll, trees, and of course buildings behind that. What I found most interesting was that change, or that route taken, violated Secret Service security measures at that time, and yet when the Secret Service drove the motorcade route, and this information is right there in the Warren Commission volumes, they came down Main Street, said, from here he goes to the Trade Mart, and they turned around and went the other way. They never did make the drive down through Dealey Plaza. Now, back to your question, there's a big controversy, you may or may not know, going on right now, because there was a special on the History Channel which brought up the same material that Barr McClellan had in his book, connecting Johnson to the Kennedy assassination. Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, the History Channel has now pulled that version of that show and is not offering it for sale anymore. Jack Valenti, Bill Moyers, Lady Bird Johnson are calling for a panel to look into all of this, and frankly, I'm with them. In fact, I think we ought to put it into court, because except for the Jim Garrison trial in New Orleans, there has never been a courtroom legal investigation into the assassination where you can call witnesses, put them under subpoena and threat of perjury, and subpoena documents and other evidence, and really find out what happened. We've never really had that. It's always been a political circus, with people just, the Warren Commission was just a sham. And the subsequent investigations have all been restrained and held back, and there's never been a really full-blown explanation. Now, as far as Johnson's involvement, the people who studied the assassination to date are pretty well agreed on 2 points, that there was mafia involvement and that there was CIA involvement. And of course, we now know that the CIA and the mafia were operating in tandem in the secret war against Castro. Now, what's really interesting is that there can be shown definite connections between Lyndon Johnson and both of those two groups, okay? But the main thing is you just have to ask yourself, just through common sense, if there was a plot to kill Kennedy, and there was, whoever was behind that plot would have to make sure that whoever succeeded him would not come after them.
Exactly.
So there had to be some kind of deal worked with Lyndon Johnson.
If he was part of it.
Well, he wouldn't necessarily even have to be part of it. He just, I could see a scenario where you would have a very powerful person that Johnson kind of looked up to and respected and knew quite well, who would probably say something like, Lyndon, Kennedy's bad for the country, and he's going to pull us out of the Vietnam War, and he's cracking down on the steel manufacturers and the big multinational corporations, and he's even messing with the Federal Reserve System by issuing interest-free money. If something should happen to him, God forbid, we know that we could count on you to do what's right. Something like that, so that when the gunshots go off, he knows which side of his bread the butter's on, and he goes along with the program. That's why we have his famous quote when he met with the generals right after the assassination and said, "Okay, gentlemen, you can have your war." And we went off into the Vietnam War.
I've got to get you back eventually for our secret societies as well. We got to.
Oh yeah, that plays a big role in it because there were 16 men around Lyndon Johnson who were known as his wise men, and these were his chief consultants, and every single one of them was a ranking member of the Council on Foreign Relations, one of these groups that I call the secret society, not because you don't know they exist, because they even have websites, but because we can't join and we're not privy to what their inner discussions are all about.
You talk about alien agenda.
There you go.
First time caller line, you're on Coast to Coast with Jim Mars. Hi there.
Hey, this is Dustin from Kansas City.
Hey, Dustin.
Go ahead.
Hey. I just found a fascinating article on the internet by Robert Morningsky, and it's titled Parallels Between the Hopi and the Sumerian Cultures. And it just goes through and talks about a lot of the terms that are almost the exact same. Like if I could just read a couple. The Hopi believe the father creator is Ka. The Sumerians believe the father essence was Ka. The Hopi believe Pahana was the lost brother who had one day returned to assist the Hopi and mankind. The Sumerians recognized Pahana as an ancestor from heaven who would return. Hopi's name for the Pleiades is Chuchucam. The Sumerians believed Shushukim were the supreme stars. And on through this document. It's quite fascinating, actually.
Well, and the similarities when you're dealing with different times are also fascinating, James. I've always wondered how different civilizations from two different spots of this planet in two different huge time periods could have similar beliefs. How does that happen?
Well, that comes back to what we talked about earlier about the fact that there may have been a prehistoric civilization of very high technology all over this planet. In fact, some of the similarities, having traveled around the world at some length, I have been fascinated with what I found. When I visited in Tibet, the Tibetans look like Peruvians. Yes. They look like they came from Peru. Yes. They dress the same way. Their features are the same way. They have a lot of the same activities, a lot of the same characteristics. It's absolutely amazing. And then, of course, you have the puzzle of the pyramids. You've got these great pyramids on the Giza Plateau in Egypt, and they are almost duplicated in the same configuration with the great pyramids outside Mexico City at Tutankhamun, or how you pronounce it. And then you've got the pyramids in China. You've got the pyramids in South America. I think these are, they may very well be remnants of an ancient civilization. And part of the proof of that, of course, is geological proof that cannot really be argued. And what I'm talking about is that, you know, we've all been taught that the Great Pyramids on the Giza Plateau were built by the Egyptians. But the Egyptian civilization only dates back to 6,000 years or so. And what we now know is that there is vertical water erosion on both the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx, which indicates they sat out under very heavy rains. And we know that there's not been any heavy rains on the Giza Plateau for more than 10,500 years.
And why do we not have specific hand-me-down records or something in terms of how the pyramids were made, who made them? You know, we've got information on the Bible. We find the Dead Sea Scrolls. We have events that are a couple thousands of years old that we can accurately track, Jim. But in terms of the Egyptians and the pyramids, it's like there was a period where there might not have been anybody around. You know, they were built and then nothing, and then these other civilizations pop up with no information on from point A to B. And that confuses me. How come there isn't anything?
Well, exactly. I think there's two reasons, and that is, number one, that you may be right. I think that the people back at that time that actually built those pyramids then either fell into decadence and lost their abilities, or they went away somewhere or something. And it was the later people who built the Egyptian dynasties. I think the second reason we don't know anything about this is because there has been a concerted effort on the part of someone throughout history to destroy our history.
Yes.
The great library at Alexandria might have answered your questions, but it was burned up and destroyed. The Great Pyramid,
Just like we destroyed the library and other things in Iraq. We're doing it now.
It itself may have answered the very questions you're answered, but when Napoleon's troops went in there, and when other groups during the Middle Ages, when the Crusaders showed up, they thought they were of the devil, so they pulled out artifacts, equipment, steals, information. They destroyed everything. The same thing they did with the pyramids in Central and South America.
And the Vatican has a lot of those in the bowels of the Vatican. And I think Uncle Sam has a lot of them in Iron Mountain inside.
It's a fascinating topic. Jim Mars, thanks again. Let's stay in touch. Let me know what happens down there on those alien ghosts, okay?
I'll see if I can find the Ghostbusters and put them on the job.
We'll work with you. Jim Mars, great guy. Steve Carr, Dan Galante, Tom Dick. Welcome to Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hey, George?
Yeah.
Check this out. There is a period of 66 days and 6 hours between the moment that Lyndon Johnson announced that he would not seek re-election as president and the moment that Bobby Kennedy was pronounced dead. On March the 31st, 1968, at 6:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, in a surprise announcement at the end of a 40-minute speech about Vietnam, Lyndon Johnson announced he would not run again for the presidency.
Right.
On June the 6th, at 1 a.m., again Pacific Standard Time, so we can make comparisons, Bobby Kennedy was pronounced dead. To the nearest hour, there are exactly 66 days and 6 hours between these two events.
That's bizarre.
In addition, the moment of Lyndon Johnson's announcement on Pacific Standard Time was 6:40 p.m. That is 6 2/3 hours after high noon on March the 31st, or 6.66 hours after high noon on March the 31st. Lyndon Johnson said he would not run for the presidency.
Now, what's the significance of all the similarities?
I don't know. I found 3666 connections with Lyndon Johnson, including the fact that after Lyndon Johnson was no longer president, Richard Nixon was president for 66.6 months. There is a triple connection of 666 with the termination of Lyndon Johnson's presidency. This was not designed by anybody as far as I can tell.
How'd you find this out?
Well, I'm looking for numerological connections among significant figures such as presidents, and I'm interested in solving the various Kennedy assassinations, and I found this connection, and it is really strange.
It is strange. The trouble is you got to figure out why the numbers. What do they mean?
I don't know, George.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Thanks for that. I appreciate it.